Episode of I didn't know what else to call it, so Diary of a Laid Off Journalist. And we're live because it's Tuesday, and I want to do these live sometimes, not always, because I do think that I'm able to be more structured and stand point when I record. But I will do this live every so often. Okay, thank you guys for your patience with the whole which direction we were going. A few things I want to talk about today. I'm continuing to get so many of your messages, and this is exactly like what I wanted. I wanted a community of encouragement and motivation, and I know so many other people are going through, whether it be a job loss or being laid off. They might just be having another season of uncertainty or sadness or whatever. So I wanted to get those messages and then kind of relay them back to you and encouragement and see whatever God puts on my heart to share. So, I wanted to share actually one of the messages I received, and you guys can hear me okay. Let me know if for some reason you can't, but I wanted to share one of the, good morning. Oh, we have a visitor from a totally different time zone. That's all right. Hi, Dave. All right, so I wanted to share one of the messages I got, and it's going to be anonymous because I don't want to share anything that anybody wrote to me and call them out unless they tell me to go ahead and call them out. But I wanted to share this message because I had some thoughts about it. So this message says, Christy, I've been watching your recent live feeds about your layoff. Truly sorry to hear about that. Your positivity is amazing. I've addressed that. I'm not always positive. Sometimes I'm just acting positive to be positive, which that's okay too. I also appreciate your honesty. Maybe God doesn't have anything bigger and better. On January 28th, I lost my job. I have struggled to understand what made this happen. I struggle daily. I'm a husband and a father of two and have really struggled with this job loss. I feel my faith is good, but has struggled during this experience. I struggle with a lot and hate having the feeling of letting my family down. I also hold it inside and don't feel like I can let it out. I struggle deeper than I'm letting people around me know. Anyways, thanks for your messages of encouragement and positivity. Truly wish you the best. So thank you for the person that sent to me this message to me. You know who you are. So when I read this message, I got emotional because this individual has been laid off longer than me since January 28th. And there's just so much emotion in it, and raw emotion and vulnerability. And I thank you for sharing that with me, and also sharing with me that you have a hard time being vulnerable about it. So I'm just like airing out, obviously, my whole personal journey with all of you. And I'm doing that also to encourage those of you who are also struggling and don't know what's next, to make sure that you are sharing with others. And you don't need a platform like this to do it, but don't be afraid to open up and share with others, because there's other people that are hurting. There's other people that are going through similar things. And I think that when we share with each other, we can encourage and lift each other up. So that's one of my thoughts on that. He said, maybe God doesn't have anything bigger and better. Now, when I said that in my last video, and I was saying, I'm getting so many of you telling me that God has something bigger and better for me. And I said, maybe he doesn't. What I meant was by society standards, by culture standards. Maybe we think that there's something bigger or better, or that's what we want to hear. But by God's standards, by society standards, let's say, maybe it wouldn't be bigger or better. But by God's standards, obviously, if it's his plan for us, a humbling experience is bigger and better by God's standards, right? Because if God wants me to come, or you, to have a humbling experience, it ultimately will be a bigger and better situation because of what it's going to do for you in the long run. The story I always love hearing about is when bad things happen. That's like the hardest thing to explain to people about faith in Christ is, well, what about the bad things that happen? And one of the best analogies is like that analogy of a tapestry. We don't know, like from close up, we can't see the big picture, but if we go further away and look down and see how it all fits together, then it can make sense. And so when we're in those seasons where just everything seems awful, and it's just because we're too close to the situation. If we are outside of it, we'll see how everything worked out. And if I'm honest with myself, all of the bad things that have happened, I can now, in hindsight, look back and see how those things needed to happen for everything to work out the way, and the best way that it would work out. So Raymond says, I was talking in God's standards. Yes, God's standards has a plan for something bigger and better, not necessarily society's standards. Kristen says, God's always at work behind the scenes and has our best interests at heart. Right. Okay, so going back to this message I read, he said that he's a husband and father, and he's struggling with this job loss, and that he feels like he's letting the family down. I would say that's probably the biggest stress of a job loss or a layoff or a struggling business, is thinking outside of yourself. If you're thinking about what it's going to do to your family. In my case, I moved 3 kids across the country, and I just was trusting that it was going to be a better situation. It's like, how do I explain that to my kids? I moved you guys across the country. We faced a pandemic, and now we might have to move again, you know? And I don't think that I have a good answer to that, other than it does cause a great deal of stress. I don't know what's next for myself, so what can I tell my kids is what's next for them. But what I can say is that I don't think that we need to shield our kids from these kinds of things. What I have found is I've been trying to just have a positive attitude, but I'm not shielding my kids from what's going on, and I'm not. And I actually sat in the car and cried with my daughter the other day, and was just saying, I told her I'm struggling, and she's my daughter, and you think like, maybe, you know, as the parent, you need to be strong for your kids. I think we're told that, but I think that letting our kids see our emotions, there's strength in that. They're going to see a strength in that we have our valleys, but that we're going to press on, which is always what I come back to and what I talked about before, pressing on. So there's a few really beautiful things that happen when you're vulnerable with your children or your loved one, I think. And I decided to be vulnerable with my teenage daughter and have that moment because I want to encourage her to be vulnerable with me. If she's facing bullies, and she has had bully type situations, or if she's struggling with anything, I want her to see my example of being willing to confess, I guess, to her, even though she's just my daughter. I want her to see that I felt safe enough to be vulnerable with her and share with her my struggle, so that she'll feel safe enough to come to me, if that makes sense. And I found that is the case. My nature is to just seem super strong and not share with my children because I'm the mom. Like, they don't need to know my struggles, right? But I'm going against that nature because I see the value in letting them in on a journey and letting them in on that. Even when you're a mom, or even when you're an adult, you can still have stresses and struggles, and it's not everything's going to be perfect all the time, but I'm hoping that fosters in them being vulnerable with me. Brent says he feels like he's letting my wife and kids down because he can't keep career job because I'm sorry, Brent. Like, I mean, I get it, because I'm there and I feel that as well. As, I mean, like I said, that's the biggest stress, is how it's going to affect those around you, right? But like I said, don't be afraid to be vulnerable and let them in, and what that does is help your family rally around you. I mean, it broke my heart the other day when one of my children was like, I have these things I want to sell, could that help? Like, you don't want that, like, stress on them. But again, I feel like they need to know. Now, here's my perspective of how I was raised. When I was raised, growing up, we were in a really good season, provided for, no worries. There was something that happened growing up where suddenly we lost everything. And I was privy to that knowledge that there was it would take too long to tell the whole story, but there was something that happened with a legit con man, and we literally like lost everything growing up. So like we had the pool, we had all of these nice things, and then in an instant we just like lost everything. My father had to start completely anew. And that Christmas, it's the like one of the few Christmases I actually totally remember. I only got one present, and I just look back at that as one of the best Christmases I had, which sounds so strange, but I just remember that there was one thing in particular that I really wanted that Christmas. And it's so stupid. I'll just tell you, it was a candy maker. Like, it's so stupid. But I knew it came from my parents, and I knew it was the one. I mean, it was one gift, but I remember what it was, and I just remember being so happy and grateful and thankful because I was in on the struggle. Like, I knew that this terrible thing had happened, and that they were starting all over, and I got one present that year, but that's like one of the main Christmases I remember. I mean, and now look at it from the other angle. If my parents had kept me in the dark and acted like everything was okay, and they were like, we're going to figure this out, and the kids won't have to worry, and, you know, we're just going to make this work, I don't think I would have seen the beauty in the whole situation and the sacrifice it took to get me one present that year. And then later years, you know, through hard work and perseverance, you know, we got in a better situation. But I got to be part of that. I got to be part of the valley and how they handled that and the sadness, but then I got to see the determination and the perseverance and the importance of all the things that really matter in life. And now, you know, as a grown adult, I'm in a situation where I feel like I've lost everything. I don't know what I'm going to do next. But I have a great example to look back to, that I'm just going to keep moving and trucking along. Raymond says you have to open communication, tell your kids everything. It's worse if you hide it and then the truth comes out. Yeah, I just think it's better to let them in on the journey, and maybe they will learn lessons from it for whatever that's worth. So going back to this message, you know, to this anonymous person, don't feel like you're letting your kids down. I mean, especially kids are so forgiving, and they it's okay to let them see you struggling, and you're going to figure it out, and you can figure it out together as a family. And I appreciate your message to me, and I'm praying for you in turn. And thank you for opening up to me, and now I want to encourage you to open up to those around you, and definitely open up to your family. So another thing that I wanted to share and read to you guys. I hope that's okay. So I have this devotional. Brian, you know what? So Brian just said move back to Toledo. We miss you. Let's see. Do I want to address this? This whole time I've said that I have not ruled out. To say that it feels uncomfortable to think about, I don't know how to put this into words. I guess there's part of me that feels like if I come back to Toledo, there's again just a part of me that like makes me feel like since I was like I didn't finish out my term here, so I was supposed to be here for a contract for 3 years, and like so to come home before then almost feels like a failure. And I'm being vulnerable and saying that because like I know that's a lie. That like my heart and mind is telling me like it'd be some kind of walk of shame or something, like it didn't work out, so I'm coming back home. And I think that it feels that way because, like I said, things didn't go as expected, and the term didn't finish out. But I am open to anything. I always said, even before I took this job, that I have no problem coming back home, but I knew I needed to like get out of my comfort zone and get out of my bubble and learn outside of where I grew up, where I went to college, where I had all of my other jobs. I just knew I needed this growth experience, and God led me and opened that door for me to come out here. And I know there's a purpose. I have no regrets about it whatsoever, even though it turned out this way. So yes, I am willing to come home in a roundabout way. I hope that answered the question. Hopefully you understand what I'm saying. I'm not saying anything bad about Toledo. I'm just saying that would be kind of a weird feeling, but I fully embrace that. And like, one thing I will tell you is that I feel so much love from all of you guys. Thank you, Kristen. Okay, now see, this is why I can't do lives. These all your comments like distract me, and then I go off at tangents. But no, hopefully I'm addressing your comments, and I will address them later if I don't right now. Thank you, Julian. Yeah, home is home. You're right, Dennis. Okay, so this is so cool. So I have this devotional, and it's called Always We Begin Again. And I got it before this happened, and it's so apropos to my situation, right? Or our situation, if you're, again, in a situation where you feel like you have to always begin again. So it's just one of the many devotionals I read. But today's was so cool because what I'm going through right now is I'm doing all these different little projects. I don't know what's next, so I am stretching myself and doing some freelancing and doing having my website created and thinking about doing a podcast, contributing to podcasts. And so I have like all of these little things that I have no idea how it's going to come together, or if it's going to come together. And I think that we normally hear, in order to be successful, you need to have a clear-cut plan and a focus, and you need to do little steps of that focus every day to get you there. And so I'm telling myself that, like, I don't have a focus. So am I going anywhere with this? Because I'm like, hoping something will stick or hoping God will show me which door is going to open, and I don't know. But what I do know is I'm just following my heart and what interests me, and like if I think that something would be a good learning experience or a challenge, I'm just going with it, and I'm just following whatever comes up. And I don't know that that's a good success strategy necessarily, but that's what I'm doing. So anyways, since I'm just following things that interest me, and I'm like also wanting to commit to some things that I have always thought would be cool but I don't have time for, this is why this devotional was so cool, and I have to read it to you guys, so bear with me. So this says, and again, copyright, this is from this book, just so you know. So this says, I'm always inspired by the part in On Writing when Stephen King talks about how he got Carrie, his first novel, written. He was living in a double wide with his wife and his first child, working 2, maybe even 3 fairly unsavory jobs to make ends meet. While the rest of his family slept, he would sneak away to a tiny utility room in the double wide, and he would put a board on his lap and put a typewriter on the board, and he would write. He wrote the entire novel that way, locked in a closet with a board on his lap and a typewriter on the board while his family slept. If you read Stephen King's whole story, you would see he had 100 reasons why that particular time in his life was not the right time to write a novel. Anyone would have agreed. There were so many reasons why he should have waited, but Stephen King had decided what he wanted, and he was going for it, even if he had to steal the time to do it. Even without a swanky writing room and a beautiful new MacBook Pro, yep, even without the glitz. If you're really brave, you're going to decide what you want. This is what I underlined. Even if you are really brave, you're going to decide what you want, and you're going to go for it. And to be perfectly honest, it's probably not going to go that well. Not nearly as well as it did for Stephen King. Probably won't get a bestseller on your first pass. Probably won't make the amount of money you thought you would if you simply followed your dreams. You probably won't gain the fame you had secretly thought you might. This is somewhat devastating because you've taken the trouble to decide what you want. You've gone for it. In some ways, it won't deliver. Not in a big, garish way we had hoped. And it goes on to say, because figuring out what we want, what we really want, wakes us up. So if you're slightly deadened, slightly distanced from your own life, start by asking yourself, what do I want? See what surfaces. Even if I have no idea what surfaces, that's a fine place to start. Just start somewhere. So this spoke to me because, like I said, I'm not necessarily even sure what I want, but see what surfaces, and that's exactly what I'm doing. And I'm encouraged now. I'm getting all these different suggestions. I'm encouraged to just start doing something, and maybe it will fail, and maybe it won't fail. I don't know, but I just found it encouraging that that's how Stephen King, like, it was not the right time. We always wait for the right time. What's the right time? Or when am I going to have all of the technological things that I need to make this work? But he didn't, and there's plenty of other stories like this where people didn't have what they necessarily needed to do what they were going to try. And it says, when we steal time to do the things we love, we find ourselves again in the parts of us that we want to protect and nourish. I'm going to read that again. When we steal time to do the things we love, we find ourselves again in the parts of us that we want to protect and nourish. So I don't know if you got anything out of that, but I just found that whole story amazing, because this is a person that went on to be successful, but he stole the time that he needed to do something that he loved, and he didn't wait for the right time, and he didn't wait for the right tools. And so that's what I feel like I'm being encouraged to do. And if there's something on your heart, if you've gotten laid off, or you've lost a job, or you just going in a different direction, then maybe you just start doing. And I think that so many of the self-help books and advice that we get is you need a clear-cut focus, and maybe you don't. Maybe you just need to start doing, and the focus will come later. And I guess that's what I'm telling myself. As usual, I'm giving advice that I'm trying to take myself. So hopefully you liked that story. Walter Gibson says, if you can and have the time. Oh, of the book. Oh, this? Okay. So this is the devotional that I've been reading, and I had gotten given to me actually before I even was in this situation. It's called Always We Begin Again, Stepping into the Next New Moment, and it's by Leanna Tankersley. And there's all kinds of stories about how we can always begin again. And also, one other thing I wanted to talk about is, one thing I want to be more conscious of doing is telling people the good things I think about them. Because I think that sometimes, I don't know if I'm the only one that has this problem, but sometimes I'll think nice things or admire someone, and I won't tell them. Why don't I tell them? I don't know. So I'm going to encourage you to, when you think nice things or have an encouragement, just share that love, share that kindness. And the reason that I want to remind you to do that is because a couple things have come up in my mind in my low moments. One was a friend that just reached out and was like, I have a story to tell you. It was a time when I was going through a valley in my life, and you played a part in bringing me out of that valley. And her sharing that with me, it's like I needed to hear that I've helped someone else when they were in a hard time. And it was really good to have that validation and be told that. And then another thing that came to mind on this topic is a former coworker that just it was kind of out of the blue in the conversation, and he was like, one thing I've always admired about you is your ability to reinvent yourself. I just feel like you're constantly reinventing yourself. And that came to mind too. I mean, and that was a year and a half ago that this coworker told me that, and it was just, God brought it to mind, I guess, as something I needed to be reminded of, is that even though I don't necessarily know what direction I'm going all the time or what's next, that someone else admired that I could reinvent myself and do new things and have courage, and I needed to hear that. So what I get from that is I really want to be that person for others and tell them something good or positive or encouraging that they will be able to think of later and lean on. So if you're like me and sometimes for whatever reason will think nice thoughts about someone or admire something about someone, and for whatever reason don't vocalize it. I have to tell myself that. Make sure you're telling people the things that you think are great or that encouraged or motivated you. Okay. All right. Well, guys, I hope this one wasn't too long. I'm always self-conscious of that when I hop on these I'm afraid I ramble or talk too long or get distracted. But I appreciate you watching. Hopefully you gained something from the message or the story or this book story. As I come across things that I think will help others in a season of uncertainty, I will share them with you. All right. Oh, and another reason I did hop down here is because I have to pack. I didn't want to pack. So this bought me some time to not pack. But yeah, I'm going to be packing and I'll be in the Toledo area for a visit and we'll see what happens. Aw, Julie and Mac just ordered the devotional book. Oh, I hope it blesses you too. It's nice to have these books that go quickly. They're real short little devotions and it has like a spot for you to write if you want to write. And for this one that I read you guys, it says I would steal time in order to, and I'll just share with you. I just wrote, and it's never anything great, but I just said I would steal time in order to write, to dream, to do more research, to connect, to encourage, to motivate, to make a difference, to follow God's leading. So that's what I had for today's writing. So it's always short, a short devotional and then a writing prompt that's short. But I think it's great for reflection. So with that, thanks, Kirk. I will be sharing more later, and I'm going to sign off. Have a good evening. Good night.